The judge smirked, shaking his head as he casually flipped through the thick stack of documents before him. The courtroom was dead silent, every person present holding their breath, waiting for him to speak. Then, with a soft chuckle, he finally looked up, his eyes locking onto the man seated before him. "Elon Musk," he said, his voice practically dripping with sarcasm. "The so-called genius billionaire who seems to think he's untouchable, above the law." His smirk widened slightly, the amusement in his tone unmistakable. The prosecution's lawyer leaned back in his chair, confidence radiating from his very posture. He was certain, absolutely certain, that today would be nothing more than a grand spectacle of humiliation for Musk. The gallery was packed to capacity, buzzing with hushed whispers. Reporters frantically scribbled notes. Cameras flashed as photographers captured every micro-expression, and spectators leaned in, eager to witness what they believed would be an inevitable downfall. Yet, despite the growing tension, Musk remained completely unfazed. He sat back in his chair, fingers interlocked, his expression unreadable. No fidgeting, no nervous glances, just calm, calculated stillness. The judge's amusement only grew at Musk's lack of reaction. He leaned forward slightly, tapping the bench in mock impatience. "I hope you're ready, Mr. Musk," he mused, tilting his head. "This isn't one of your Twitter debates. This is a courtroom. A real one." A ripple of chuckles spread through the room. The prosecutor smirked, playing off the laughter. But Musk? He didn't even blink. His eyes remained locked on the judge, unwavering, unreadable. Then finally he spoke. One single sentence. And just like that, the entire courtroom froze. The laughter died in an instant. The prosecutor's smirk faltered, his confidence flickering for the first time. Even the judge, so smug and sure of himself moments ago, hesitated. No one, absolutely no one, had expected this. The lead prosecutor, quickly regaining his composure, adjusted his tie and took a step forward, his voice smooth, rehearsed, and laced with unshakable certainty. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, turning towards the jury, his gestures calculated and precise. "We are gathered here today because of one simple fact. A billionaire believes he exists outside the law." He turned sharply, locking eyes with the judge as if to reinforce his point. "The evidence is undeniable. Overwhelming, in fact. Mr. Musk's company has repeatedly ignored regulations, disregarded legal protocols, and displayed a blatant, almost arrogant, defiance of the very rules that apply to everyone else." The judge gave a slow, knowing nod, amusement still flickering in his gaze. "Mr. Musk," he said, his voice laced with something that almost sounded like entertainment, "I assume you're aware of how serious these allegations are?" Musk tilted his head slightly, as if considering the words. Still, he didn't speak. Not yet. The prosecutor took the opportunity to press forward, flipping through his documents with theatrical precision. "Your Honor," he continued, his voice gaining momentum, "this is not merely a case of corporate misbehavior. This is textbook defiance. Mr. Musk has built an entire career out of pushing boundaries, bending the rules, testing the limits of authority." He paused, then delivered his final blow. But today, he has finally met a boundary that will not bend the law. A murmur of agreement swept through the crowd. The judge chuckled, shaking his head as he leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Musk," he said, resting his chin on his hand, "are you planning to defend yourself today? Or should we start by explaining some basic legal terminology?" Laughter rippled through the room once more. The prosecutor grinned, seizing the moment. "Your Honor," he added smoothly. The defendant seems amused. Perhaps he thinks this is another press conference where he can simply tweet his way out of trouble. But this is not Twitter, and we are not dealing in polls and memes. Here, we deal in facts. The judge exhaled, his grin widening as he studied Musk. "I must admit," he said, "I'm curious, Mr. Musk. Do you actually have a defense? Or are we all just here to watch you craft your next viral post?" More chuckles. The jury exchanged knowing glances, already convinced they were about to witness a legal takedown of epic proportions. The prosecutor turned back to the judge, his confidence soaring. "Your Honor," he declared, "given the undeniable weight of the evidence, we formally request that this court recognize Mr. Musk's violations and proceed with swift action against him." The judge nodded, tapping his gavel lightly. "Mr. Musk," he said, his tone shifting slightly, "I strongly suggest you say something now before I start wondering if you even belong in this courtroom." And for the first time, Musk moved. He shifted in his seat, took a slow, measured breath, then adjusted his jacket with deliberate precision. A brief silence settled over the room as he stood, exhaling softly. Then, in a voice steady yet tinged with undeniable amusement, he finally spoke. "Your Honor," Musk began, his smirk barely visible, "I'd like to personally thank the prosecution for their very dramatic interpretation of reality." A ripple of murmurs spread like wildfire. The judge narrowed his eyes slightly, the amusement in his expression dimming just a fraction. Musk, now pacing slowly, continued. "We keep hearing about laws, about regulations, about how I've supposedly disrespected the system," he said. "But the real issue, the part everyone conveniently ignores, is this. Does the system even make sense to begin with?" The prosecutor scoffed, arms crossing. "Is that your defense, Mr. Musk?" he shot back. "That the law doesn't make sense?" Musk stopped, turning to face him directly. "No," he said smoothly. "My defense is that you don't understand the very law you're trying to enforce." Silence. The once laughing courtroom had fallen deathly still. The judge leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. Musk reached for a document on the table, flipping through the pages with practiced ease. "This entire case," he continued, "relies on the assumption that my company violated existing regulations. But let's actually look at those regulations, shall we?" Holding up a legal text, he turned to the judge. "This law, the one they claim gives them authority over my company, was written before the internet even existed." Gasps. A hushed murmur swept through the room. The judge's eyebrows lifted slightly. The prosecutor opened his mouth to counter, but no words came out. Musk pressed forward. "Now, let's apply some logic here," he said. "How do you enforce laws on an industry that didn't even exist when those laws were created? That's like trying to regulate electric vehicles with horse-drawn carriage laws." The prosecutor scoffed, shaking his head. "That's a weak comparison, Mr. Musk." Musk smirked. "Is it?" And just like that, the entire courtroom felt the shift. This was no longer just a trial. It was something else entirely. Musk cut in smoothly, his voice calm yet unwavering. "Do they?" he asked, his tone carrying the weight of certainty. "Because Section 43.1 of the very same law directly contradicts the foundation of the prosecution's case." With deliberate ease, he flipped another page of the document before him and pointed at the specific clause. It explicitly states that if a technology falls outside the scope of existing regulations, new standards must be drafted before any legal action can be pursued. A heavy silence fell over the courtroom. The judge's eyes darted across the text, his expression subtly shifting as he processed Musk's words. The prosecutor, however, paled. His confidence wavered. He hadn't accounted for this clause. He hadn't even seen it. Musk folded his arms across his chest, exuding an air of absolute control. "So, tell me, Your Honor, are we truly here to discuss legal violations, or is this an attempt to stifle innovation under outdated regulations?" The prosecutor scrambled, his thoughts tripping over themselves as he attempted to regain footing. That's, he stammered, but Musk had already moved beyond him. He smiled, but it wasn't the smug grin of a man enjoying a verbal sparring match. No, this was the measured, knowing smile of someone who had just flipped the entire case on its head. The judge set the document down with a slow, deliberate motion. He wasn't merely listening anymore. He was reevaluating everything. With a deep breath, he rubbed his temple, as if trying to ward off the growing realization that the balance of power in this courtroom had shifted. He had entered this trial believing he was in control, certain that Musk was just another billionaire attempting to manipulate legal loopholes. But now he wasn't so sure anymore. Musk stood tall, his posture effortless, his voice steady. He wasn't arguing. He wasn't pleading his case. He was teaching. Your Honor, Musk said as he casually flipped to another marked section. This isn't just about a single law. It's about legal consistency. If one regulation is enforced while another contradictory law is ignored, then we aren't applying justice. We're simply picking winners based on convenience. The prosecutor's shoulders stiffened. Objection, he burst out. Your Honor, he's twisting legal technicalities to his advantage. These two. Musk turned his gaze to him, head tilting ever so slightly, amusement flickering in his eyes. Oh? You mean the same technicalities your case is built on? He let the words hang in the air for a moment before adding, funny how that works, isn't it? The courtroom stilled. The judge, who had earlier been reclining with an air of amusement, was no longer leaning back at all. He was hunched forward, hands clasped, eyes locked onto Musk. He wasn't laughing anymore. Musk remained unshaken, continuing with calculated precision. Let's talk about precedent, he said. In Smithson v. Tech Corp., the ruling was crystal clear. No company can be penalized for operating in a legal gray area when existing laws fail to address their innovation. He paused, letting the significance of his words settle over the room. That case, Your Honor, was decided in this very courtroom. The judge blinked. He remembered that case. And, judging by the stiffened posture of the prosecution, so did they. Then, Musk delivered the final blow. So, Your Honor, the real question is this. Are we here to apply justice? Or are we here to punish progress simply because it doesn't fit neatly inside outdated rules? Silence. Heavy, palpable silence. For the first time, the judge wasn't certain who held the power in this room anymore. The prosecutor clenched his jaw, flipping through his notes in desperation, trying to find something, anything, to salvage his crumbling argument. But Musk had torn through his case like a wrecking ball. The judge, who had entered this courtroom with a smirk, now sat in deep thought, fingers tapping lightly against the bench. And then, in a last-ditch effort, the prosecutor seized a thick stack of papers and strode toward the bench, his voice loud, forced. Your Honor, he declared, we have new evidence. This document proves that Mr. Musk knowingly disregarded regulations. It's all here, in black and white. Musk didn't flinch. Didn't so much as raise an eyebrow. Instead, he merely folded his arms, watching as the prosecutor dug his own grave. The judge arched a skeptical brow and flipped through the newly presented pages. Mr. Musk, he said, his voice measured. Do you have a response to this? Musk took a slow step forward. Of course, Your Honor. He gestured toward the document. That's fascinating. Because this report was written after the lawsuit was filed. A wave of murmurs rippled through the gallery. The prosecutor froze. Musk continued, his voice smooth, unbothered. If this document was so critical to their case, why did it conveniently appear only now? He let the rhetorical question sink in before finishing. It's not evidence, Your Honor. It's a last-minute attempt to patch the holes in an argument that was already sinking. The judge's gaze flickered toward the prosecutor, expecting an explanation. None came. Musk delivered his final strike. Desperation isn't a legal strategy, counselor. His expression remained composed. It's just desperation. The prosecutor's face turned red. His mouth opened, but no words formed, because there was nothing left to say. For the first time, Musk wasn't just defending himself. He was winning. The courtroom fell eerily silent. Every person in the room, every reporter, every juror, every spectator, was watching the judge, waiting for his response. And the judge, who had once laughed at Musk's defense, now sat in deep contemplation, his fingers drumming lightly against the bench. The balance of power in that room had shifted, and everyone could feel it. I've expanded and reworded your script while keeping the same dramatic tone and articulate style. Let me know if you need any tweaks.